Chapter 15. The Man of the Island. From the side of the hill. Sorry, I'm just moving that up a bit. Hope it wasn't too loud. Clong. From the side of the hill, which was here steep and stony, a spout of gravel was dislodged and fell rattling and bounding through the trees. My eyes turned instinctively in that direction, and I saw a figure leap with great rapidity behind the trunk of a pine. What it was, whether bear or man or monkey, I could in no wise tell. It seemed dark and shaggy, more I knew not, but the terror of this new apparition brought me to a stand. Sounds like an Ewok so far. I was now, it seemed, cut off upon both sides. Behind me the murderers, before me this lurking nondescript. More of Jim's slightly sniffy judgmental tone there. Oh, a lurking nondescript. And immediately I began to prefer the dangers that I knew to those I knew not. Silver himself appeared less terrible in contrast with this creature of the woods. Definitely an Ewok. And I turned on my heel and, looking sharply behind me over my shoulder, began to retrace my steps in the direction of the boats. Instantly, the figure reappeared and, making a wide circuit, began to head me off. I was tired, at any rate, but had I been as fresh as when I rose, I could see it was in vain for me to contend in speed with such an adversary. From trunk to trunk the creature flitted like a deer, running man-like on two legs, but unlike any man that I had ever seen, stooping almost double as it ran. Yet a man it was. I could no longer be in doubt about that. I think it's an Ewok. I'm fairly certain it's an Ewok. I began to recall what I had heard of cannibals. Nothing intelligent, I would imagine. I was within an ace of calling for help, but the mere fact that he was a man, however wild, had somewhat reassured me, and my fear of Silver began to revive in proportion. I stood still, therefore, and cast about for some method of escape. And as I was so thinking, the recollection of my pistol flashed into my mind. Of course, because Long John gave him that smart little pistol. Was like, here you go. Look after that, won't you, Jim? As soon as I remembered I was not defenceless, courage glowed again in my heart, and I set my face resolutely for this man of the island and walked briskly towards him. Did Long John give him the pistol, or did somebody else give him a pistol? Who gave him a pistol? Who gave this child a gun? Sounds like something Long John would do. But they say it was Long John. Probably was. Long John's always like, here you go, here's a gun. And whatever you do, don't question me murdering people. So, he makes his way towards what we think is an Ewok. He was concealed, by this time, behind another tree trunk. More evidence for my theory that Long John is from Pittsburgh. Oh yeah, maybe he's NRA, Long John. I mean, in these days, this is 7 years before the Revolutionary War. Did Pittsburgh exist then? I think it did. Maybe? No. I think Long John's an Englishman. Long John's an Englishman. He was concealed by this time behind another tree trunk, but he must have been watching me closely. For as soon as I began to move in his direction, he reappeared and took a step to meet me. Then he hesitated, drew back, came forward again, and at last, to my wonder and confusion, threw himself on his knees and held out his clasped hands in supplication. At that I once more stopped. "Who are you?" I asked. "Ben Gunn," he answered, and his voice sounded hoarse and awkward like a rusty lock. Good bit of direction there from Robert Louis Stevenson. I'll try and have a Rusty Lock voice. I'm poor Ben Gunn, I am. That's going to be too much effort. You get the idea. I'm poor Ben Gunn, I am. And I haven't spoke with a Christian these 3 years. Now, when he says Christian there, I assume he means a Western European, which he obviously is. I could now see that he was a white man, like myself, and that his features were even pleasing. His skin, wherever it was exposed, was burnt by the sun. Even his lips were black, and his fair eyes looked quite startling in so dark a face. So he's a bloke who's basically been sat on the beach for years, not drinking any water. Maybe there is no water. Seawater. Water everywhere, not a drop to drink. Of all the beggar men, we've talked a bit about this language that Jim uses, and I'm not a fan. But it's from the 19th century, this book. It doesn't make it okay, though. Of all the beggar men that I had seen or fancied? That obviously he means imagined. Still, it does sound a bit like all. Of all the beggars I fancied, Jim's a weird guy. Just in terms of how he thinks and how he talks. He was the chief. He does say he finds his features pleasing. Good point, Rhiannon. I think Jim fancies Ben Gunn. We'll have to unpack that later in book club. He was the chief for raggedness. He was clothed with tatters of old ship's canvas and old sea cloth. Very mature 6-year-old, yeah. I mean, you do sort of fancy people when you're 6, don't you? I remember really fancying the Spice Girls when I was 6. I don't know, you fancy Ginger Spice? It was chanted in the playground at me when I revealed my Spice Girls chocolate bar my mum had put in me lunch. Do you remember that? There were like Spice Girls chocolate biscuits. That's how big the Spice Girls were in like 1997. Oh man, those were days. I miss those days. Scary all the way. Yeah, I love Scary as well. But Ginger was always my favourite spice. Always my favourite spice. Is that an unusual spice to be a favourite? Because everyone was like, oh, you fancy Ginger Spice? I was like, yes. I cried when Jerry left. I've said it out loud now. I've said it out loud on the internet. That's your prize for following me today. For bringing me up to the level of affiliate. I'll lay it bare for you. I cried when Jerry left. I cried my eyes out. Anyway. Mel C, the most down to earth. Yeah, I did like Mel C as well. I liked them all. I loved them all. But in terms of who you fancy when you're 6, I did most fancy Ginger Spice out of the Spice Girls when I was 6. My older cousins really fancied Posh Spice. Posh Spice seemed to be the most fancied Spice Girl amongst young lower middle class and working class members. Posh Spice was a big objectified spice. But it was always Jerry for me. It was always Jerry. She was like cardboard. Yes, and there were a lot of cardboard cutouts of the Spice Girls everywhere, weren't there? Life-size cardboard cutouts. I remember one afternoon, one very lovely afternoon, just me and my cousin were like, wouldn't it... we would have been about 7 and 9, I guess. Like, wouldn't it be great if we looked out in the garden and the Spice Girls were there? The thoughts you have when you're like that age. Why would they... I mean, that would be amazing, obviously, if you looked out into your garden and next to your granddad's pigeon pen, the Spice Girls had arrived. Would have been brilliant. That's so cute. It is cute, isn't it, really? But it is also very weird. I do have a really distinct memory of that now. Wouldn't it be class if we looked outside and the Spice Girls were in the garden? I've got a really strong memory of that. Is it funny, them little things you remember? Yeah, it would have been in the in the garden next to my granddad's pigeon pen, 2 big bags of concrete, a wheelbarrow, the dog, and just the Spice Girls. Hello! Oh my God, it's the Spice Girls. My girlfriend went to the zoo and Jerry was there. James May and Stephen Fry, my idols. We all have these. The Spice Girls were so marketed to us. So marketed. Do you remember how even as a 6, 7-year-old, how exciting that time felt? Cool Britannia, as they say. Even as a kid, you go, London exists. Oasis probably. And it's a bittersweet symphony, 3 lines on a shirt, it's coming. If you want to be my lover. Pokemon, the days. Pokemon a bit later on, 1999, I'm going to say, when that showed up on England's shores. Those were the days. No Tories then at that point as well. No Tories in charge. Come on. I mean, it's an obvious point, but come on, there were no Tories in charge. 97. Mad on. I mean, not the Tony Blair. And look, we don't need to get into all that. We're just talking about the Spice Girls. God love you, Jerry. God love you. Wherever you are. In a massive house, probably, somewhere. Living a very nice life. I love the films that make great TV. So you mean Spice World the movie, yeah? Spice World the movie. My absolute fave. And I had it on a lime green VHS tape. Do you remember? Did anyone else have that? The lime green VHS of Spice World the movie. It was like that and Jurassic Park on VHS were constantly in the VHS player. Good. That bit at the end where it's like every boy and every girl, spice, taking to the left, and it's all the newsreaders are dancing like that. And James Bond's dancing with a pig in his arms. Roger Moore with a pig in his arms. Come on, those were the days. Anybody remember Panda Pops? Anyway, 19th century literature about pirates, which is why we're here. Ben Gunn. To become number 1 when I was born. Oh, Minislot, you're so young. Well, Minislot 1997, born in 1997. Yeah, what a great auspice for your life. Great song, great number 1, great year. I'm sure there's plenty of reasons why it wasn't a great year, but I'm a sheltered idiot. I don't know anything. Really want to watch them again now. I really want to watch them. I could definitely watch Spice World the movie again. I mean, I'm sure it would break my heart out how pants it is, but still. Meatloaf's driving the bus. Meatloaf's driving the bus in it. Anyway, Ben Gunn. He's a parched old raisin who's been on the beach and he's dressed in a sail. We got the general idea. He's like that. All dried up. We've got wrapped a big bit of sack around him. Oh, I ain't seen a Christian for 3 years. So he sounds a little bit. He sounds a bit Britain first altogether. I'm not sure. Well, we're not judge. He's been on his own for 3 years. 3 years. He's a bit of a state as well, only for 3 years. It's only been 3 years. It's not been 10 years. But I mean, it's got to be rough living on a desert island for 3 years, isn't it? Not another soul. And by the sounds of it, only easily alarmed ducks to eat. Just found it on YouTube. Well done, Green Tea. I'm gonna find it afterwards as well. I'm gonna watch it if I can't sleep tonight. Too much of nothing is blue, deep blue. I can't remember the words, but that's a great start, isn't it? Too much. Credits. Bad enough. Richard E. Grant. Make it sad. Yes, my dear. Anyway. Ben Gunn. Absolute raisin. He was clothed with tatters of old ship's canvas and an old sea cloth, and this extraordinary patchwork was all held together by a system of the most various and incongruous fastenings. Brass buttons, bits of stick, and loops of tarry gaskin, old bits of rope. Thanks for the update, Green Tea. Must be great when it looks like the whole thing. I'll find it. About his waist, he wore an old brass-buckled leather belt, which was the one thing solid in his whole accoutrement. 3 years, I cried. Were you shipwrecked? I nearly said shipwrecked then, didn't I? Were you shipwrecked? Nay, mate, said he. Marooned. I heard the word, and I knew it stood for a horrible kind of punishment common enough among the buccaneers, in which the offender is put ashore with a little powder and shot, and left behind on some desolate and distant island. That's what's happened to him. That's what's happened to Ben Gunn. Marooned 3 years agone. Ago. Marooned 3 years agone, he continued, and lived on gout since then, and berries and oysters. That sounds lovely. Wherever a man is, says I, a man can do for himself. Sounds like again a bit of a Tory. But mate, my heart is sore for Christian diet. You mightn't happen. I just saw the next line and laughed, and it made me made a bit of snot come out. This is one of the weirdest chapters we've had so far. But mate, my heart is sore for Christian diet. You mightn't happen to have a piece of cheese about you now? No? Well, many's the long night I've dreamed of cheese. Toasted mostly. And woke up again, and here I were. So this poor bastard's just been... He's saying, a Christian diet. He just means English food at that time, which I assume... Well, I don't assume, I absolutely know it. Christian cheddar, says Barbara Rob, yeah. A lot of hard cheese, bread, salted beef, probably. Very cheap cuts of mutton, barley, beer, turnips, potatoes prevalent by that point as well. Swedes. Yeah. To be honest, it does sound quite nice. I can understand why he's missed it. Although he's been eating oysters, which of course at the time were the food of the impoverished. Oysters wasn't until the late 19th century, the early 20th century, oysters became a fancy food. Which makes sense when you think of it, doesn't it? It's like oysters, you're like, oh God, what am I going to eat? Oh, clunk. Pull one off a rock. Oh, clunk. Eat that. And now it's fancy. The gentrification of mollusks. Is it a mollusk? Or a bivalve? Or is a bivalve a mollusk? Who can say? Anyway, Ben Gunn is absolutely nyamming them down. But he's dreaming of cheese. He's dreaming of his Christian cheddar, as Bulbarob says. If ever I can get aboard again, said I, you shall have cheese by the stone, by which he means a heavy weight. So Jim's kind of going like, if you help me get back to my ship, I'll have an absolute wheel of Edam ready for you, my son. 4 kilos of Wensleydale, if you can get me back aboard that ship. All this time he'd been feeling the stuff of my jacket, smoothing my hands, looking at my boots, and generally, in the intervals of his speech, showing a childish pleasure in the presence of a fellow creature. Oh, hello, says Nice. People used to fish oysters out of the Gowanus Canal in New York. Gowanus? Gowanu? Now there's 3 feet of black mayonnaise at the bottom of it. Look it up if you like looking at bad things. Wow. Thanks for that, Nice Normal Person. I'm assuming Nice Normal Person is American, because they've got a lot of good American facts for us. All bivalves are mollusks, but not vice versa, apparently, says Minnie Slot. That makes sense. That makes sense. Biology, never my strong point. That is gross, isn't it? Oysters just kind of they just sort of turned to sludge, or the sludge appeared when all the oysters went. I'm sure we'll clear it up. We'll clear it up in book club. So Ben Gunn's basically being like, welcome aboard, Bee in the Bottle. Thank you very much for the follow. So Ben Gunn is basically just sort of looking at Jim's jacket and shoes and being like, oh, clothes! It's been a while. And then Jim's gone, get me back on my ship and there'll be absolute Wallace levels of cheese waiting for you. At my last words, he perked up in a kind of startled slyness. Like that. If ever you can get aboard again, says you, he repeated. Why now, who's to hinder you? Not you, I know, was my reply. I made that sound sassy, but I think he meant it more friendly. Not you, I know. You're a good lad, was my reply. And right you was, he cried. Now you, what do you call yourself, mate? Jim, I told him. Jim, says he, quite pleased, apparently. That is written, that wasn't me saying that. Quite pleased, apparently. Jim. Well now, Jim, I've lived that rough as you'd be ashamed to hear of. Now, for instance, you wouldn't think I'd had a pious mother to look at me? He asked. Why, no, not in particular, I answered. Ah, well, said he. But I had. Remarkable pious. And I was a civil, pious boy. And, well, I wish we had a bit of sort of sad music to play here as we hear Ben Gunn's origin story. So he's got a very religious mother. Frodo Gollum. It is getting a bit Gollum. Sewage and overfishing killed the oysters. But the loss of the oysters led to the chemical sludge. They naturally filter water and improve their environment. Every day is a school day on the Treasure Island Twitch stream. I didn't know that at all. That's fantastic information. Bully for oysters. Bully! Thanks for that, Nice Normal Person. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, Ben Gunn's going on about his religious mother and the dutiful Christian upbringing is what he had. What kind of Christian? I'm thinking he's probably a Methodist or a Baptist, I would have thought. Rural southeast, southwest of England. 18th century, prides himself on piety. And I was a civil pious boy, I could rattle off my catechism that fast. Now, catechism is definitely a Holy Roman thing. Speaking as Holy Roman, we've definitely got a catechism. Do the Methodists and the Baptists have a catechism? I don't know. But he's rattling it off. Maybe they did in the 18th century, maybe they don't know. I don't know. And I could rattle off my catechism that fast as you couldn't tell one word from another. Not really worth rattling it off then, is it, really? If that's... You boy, recite us your catechism. Certainly, sir. Slow down, slow down. No! The Lord said, thou shalt not steal. Who is thy God? Who made thee the Lord thy God? It's the only bit I remember of the catechism. Who has made thee the Lord thy God? His mother like that. And here's what it came to, Jim. And it began with Chuck Farthing on the blessed gravestones. That's what it began with, but it went further than that, and so my mother told me, and predict the owl she did, the pious woman. Oh, so, basically he thinks he's had a bit of bad luck. He's done ill in his life, and so now he's on this island. But it were Providence that put me here. I've thought it all out in this here lonely island, and I'm back on piety. You don't catch me toasting rum so much, but just a thimble for luck, of course. Cheeky. Just a thimble for luck. I don't touch the booze no more. Just the occasional bit of rum, you know, sort of thing. Just a thimbleful for luck, of course, the first chance I have. I'm bound I'll be good, and I see the way to. And Jim, looking all around him and lowering his voice to a whisper, and Jim, I'm rich. I now felt sure that the poor fellow had gone crazy in his solitude, and I suppose I must have shown the feeling in my face. For he repeated the statement hotly. Rich! Rich, says I. I says. I automatically made it says I to make it sound more piratical, I suppose. Rich, says I says. And I'll tell you what. I'll make a man of you, Jim. Oh, Jim, you'll bless your stars, you will, that you was the first that found me. And at this, there came suddenly a lowering shadow over his face. And he tightened his grasp upon my hand and raised a forefinger threateningly before my eyes. Now, Jim. I'm joking. Now, Jim, you tell me true. That ain't Flint's ship? He asked. At this I had a happy inspiration. I began to believe that I'd found an ally, and I answered him at once. It's not Flint's ship, and Flint is dead. But I'll tell you true as you asked me. There are some of Flint's hands aboard. Worse luck for the rest of us. Not a man with one leg, he gasped. So sounds like he was part of the crew as well. Silver? I asked. Oh, Silver, says he. That were his name. He's the cook and the ringleader too. He was still holding me by the wrist, and at that he gave it quite a ring. If you were sent by Long John, he said, I'm as good as pork, and I know it. So he's toast, basically, is what he said. I'm as good as pork. It's a good phrase, though. Oh, I'm as good as pork if I don't meet that deadline. I'm as good as pork, and I knows it. But where was you? But where was you? Where was you, do you suppose? I'd made up my mind in a moment, and by way of answer told him the whole story of our voyage, and the predicament in which we found ourselves. He heard me with the keenest interest, and when I had done, he patted me on the head. You're a good lad, Jim, he said. And you're all in the clove hitch, ain't you? The good one, a clove hitch. A tight spot. You're all in the clove hitch, aren't you? Well, you just put your trust in Ben Gunn. Ben Gunn's the man to do it. What do you think it likely now? That your squire would prove a liberal-minded one? in course of help, him being in a clovage, as you remark? I told him the squire was the most liberal of men. Not politically, eh? Aye, but you see, returned Ben Gunn, I didn't mean giving me a guide to keep, and a shoot of livery clothes and such. That's not my mark, Jim. What I mean is, would he be likely to come down to the tune of, say, £1,000 out of money that's as good as a man's own already? So he knows his way around Bartram, as Ben Gunn. I'm sure the squire will take very good care of you. Yeah, when you say that, I don't want a job on his land. I want a grand. Smart man. I'm sure he would, said I. As it was, all hands were to share. Obviously, they're talking about the treasure when they're talking about the money. And the passage home, he added with a look of great shrewdness. Why, I cried, the squire's a gentleman. And besides, if we got rid of the others, we should want you to help work the vessel home. Ah, said he, so you would. And he seemed very much relieved. Now I'll tell you what, he went on. So much I'll tell you and no more. I were in Flint's ship when he buried the treasure. He and 6 along, 6 strong seamen. They was ashore nigh on a week, and us standing off and on in the old Walrus. The name of Captain Flint's ship, the Walrus. One fine day, up went the signal, and here come Flint by himself in a little boat, and his head done up in a blue scarf. The sun was getting up, and mortal wide he looked about the cut water. There's no way you're going to... I'm going too much on the 1950s Hollywood English sailor voice. So he's determined and horrified, is Captain Flint, by what he's saying. But there he was, you mind, in the 6 all dead. Dead and buried. How he done it, not a man aboard us could my God. It was a battle, murder, and sudden death. Leastways, him against 6. Billy Bones was the mate. Beware the one-legged mine, Jim. Beware the one-legged mine. Long John, he was quartermaster. All right, Jim, don't you worry. I'll get you a nice Mr. Kipling's apple pie if you want to go on the shore later and explore that. And they asked him where the treasure was. Ah, says he. For some reason, he can do a perfect impression of Long John. Ah, says he. You can go ashore if you like, and stay, he says. But as for the ship, she'll beat up for more by thunder. That's what he said. Well, I was in another ship 3 years back, and we sighted this island. Boys, said I, here's Flint's treasure. Let's land and find it. The captain was displeased at this, but my messmates were all of a mind and landed. 12 days that I looked for it, and every day they had the worst word for me, until one fine morning all hands went aboard. And as for you, Benjamin Gunn, says they, here's a musket, they says, a gun, the forerunner to a rifle, and a spade, and a pickaxe. You can stay here and find Flint's money for yourself, they says. They says. God, I've been Ben Gunn for a long time now. Well, Jim, 3 years have I been here, and not a bite of Christian diet from that day to this. But now, you look here. Look at me. Do I look like a man before the mast? No, says you. Nor I weren't neither, I says. And with that he winked and pinched me hard. Why? Ow! Just you mention them words to your squire, Jim, he went on. Nor he weren't, neither. That's the words. 3 years he were the man of this island, light and dark, fair and rain. And sometimes he would, maybe, think upon a prayer, says you, and sometimes he would, maybe, think of his old mother, so be as she's alive, you'll say. But the most part of Gunn's time, this is what you'll say, the most part of his time was took up with another matter. And then you'll give him a nip like I do. And he pinched me again in the most confidential manner. A confidential pinch? What the... Oh. Then, he continued, must he continue, then you'll up and you'll say this. Gunn is a good man, you'll say. And he puts a precious sight more confidence, a precious sight, mind that, in a gentleman born than these gentlemen of fortune, even been one himself. He's a bit of a bootlicker, is Ben Gunn. But he's been in bad company. He's been in pirate company. Dick Van Dyke. Yeah, it is a bit. Blimey, Maury Poppins. What, been marooned on an island, or you? No, it is Dick Van Dyke, isn't it? That's the voice of it. It is Dick Van Dyke. Well, I said, I don't understand one word that you've been saying. You and me both, Jim. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 paragraphs Ben Gunn's been talking for. Well, I don't understand a word you've been saying, says Jim. But that's neither here nor there. For how am I to get aboard? Jim just trying to stick to the point. Well, I haven't got a clue what any of that means. But how are we getting aboard? That's the main. Ah, said he. That's the hitch for sure. Well, there's my boat that I made with me 2 ends. I'll keep her under the White Rock. If the worst comes to the worst, we might try that after dark. Hi! He broke out. What's that? Now it says hi there because that is how people used to say, huh? Or like, oi! It was hi! Hi you! You always see it in old book, like Sherlock Holmes or something. He's like, hi you fellow! Hi you! Stop that! Hi you! Come back here! Hi you! Isn't like the famous 5 or something? Hi! He broke out. So it's not him being like, hi! He broke out. What's that? And just then, although the sun had still an hour or 2 to run, all the echoes of the island awoke and bellowed to the thunder of a cannon. That's what that would sound like. Actually, it'd be like, this is how a cannon works. Light the gunpowder with the fuse. Light the cannon! Light the cannon. Everybody cover your ears. Gunpowder. Fires the charge. Cannonball. That's it flying. That's it hitting something. Or I imagine it's probably hitting the water. Like that. Deafening. They have begun to fight, I cried. Follow me! And I began to run towards the anchorage, my terrors all forgotten, while, close at my side, the marooned man in his goatskins trotted easily and lightly. Left, says he. Keep to your left end, my Jim. Under the trees with you. There's where I killed me first goat. Goat. So I said that like it was gout. They don't come down here now. They're all masted on them mountains for the fear of Benjamin Gunn. Ah, and there's the cemetery. No, it's a... Ah, and there's the cemetery. Cemetery, he must have meant. That's what it's written. And there's the cemetery. Cemetery, he must have meant. You see the mounds? I come here and prayed nows and thens when I thought maybe a Sunday would be about due. It weren't quite a chapel, but it seemed more solemn like. And then, says you, Ben Gunn was short-handed, no chapeling, nor so much as a Bible and flag, says you. Definitely, at least Church of England then. It wouldn't be a Roman Catholic. Not allowed, I don't think, in them days. It was banned, I think, in England, wasn't it? Them being Roman Catholic. So he kept talking as I ran, neither expecting nor receiving any answer. The cannon shot was followed, after a considerable interval, by a volley of small arms. Musket fire now. Musket fire. Fire! The click of the dog head into the pan. Gunpowder. Musket ball. Sound like that. Like a firework. Not like gunfire now. Reload. Takes ages to reload. Fire 2 shots a minute, possibly. 2 shots a minute. Another pause, and then, not a quarter of a mile in front of me, I beheld the Union Jack flutter in the air above a wood. End of chapter. And end of part 3 of Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. Hoo-yah!